Welcome to another edition of the ITMOD podcast. Joining me is Brad Gullickson, Mouth Dork.
Dude.
Yeah. And I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork. And this is the ITMOD podcast, CHATcast. Something really freaking cool just happened.
Like minutes ago?
Yeah. Who were you just chit-chatting with, B?
We were just talking to Larry Cohen.
Like the Larry Cohen?
The Larry Cohen. And I'm sure if you're a loyal ITMOD listener, you know who Larry Cohen is. He directed Black Caesar.
Black Caesar.
It's Alive.
It's Alive.
The Stuff.
The Stuff. Chocolate Chip Charlie.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
He's made major movies. Mm-hmm. And movies that had tremendous impact on me growing up and to this day.
Yeah. That dude, his career is so prolific that there's a line, I want to say it was spoken by John Landis in the trailer for King Cohen, where it says that, you know, you'll see movies that you didn't even know Larry Cohen had something to do with.
Right.
And sure enough, like Phone Booth. Like,
oh yeah, dude, we didn't even talk to Larry Cohen about Phone Booth. Yeah. Spoilers, no Phone Booth talk.
Yeah. I didn't know that until watching the documentary, which we caught at Fantastic Fest last year. It hasn't found distribution yet, has it?
King Cohen, they're working on it. It's got a distributor. They just need to get it out there into the world.
Okay.
It's having screenings all around. The Alamo Drafthouse, their film club in One Loudon is going to be showing King Cohen and Q The Winged Serpent back to back. If you're in the D.C. area, you better make that happen. And in fact, I think they're also having a special screening of it in Asheville, Virginia, which is further south of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so check your local, festivals, your local theaters. If there's an Alamo near you, it's definitely going to be playing there.
Yeah, it's a fascinating documentary, and it's extremely entertaining. It's covering the career of a guy who he's done television, he's done theater, he's done movies, he's written for other films and other directors and stuff like that, and he's still working. He's still working to this day. Yeah. He wants to do another play.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, he's got some ideas for an hour-long TV show.
Yep.
And he'll probably come up with another couple hundred scripts for movies between now and whenever that stuff released. The guy is really generous with his time. He's really cool to talk to, and I can't wait for you all to hear this interview. And by all means, please check that movie out, King Cohen.
And we've interviewed so many amazing people on this podcast.
Yeah.
ITMOD has been a blessing to film nerds like us.
Yep.
And I don't mean to do a disservice to anybody else we've talked to on this podcast, but this is my favorite ITMOD episode. I mean, Larry Cohen is a god to me. I worship his films. And it is. I've got goosebumps as I'm talking.
Yeah.
Not to oversell this conversation, but it was like a dream come true.
Yeah, easily. So stay tuned, folks. This is our chat with Larry Cohen.
Larry, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We are diehard fans of your career, and this is a real thrill.
Well, it's nice to be talking to you.
I thought where we could start is with King Cohen itself. What a surreal experience that must be to have Steve Mitchell come out and make a film about everything that you've put out there in the world. What is that like for you?
Well, it was a big surprise to me. I had nothing to do with originating the project. And I didn't involve myself in the making of it in terms of the creative decisions. He picked all the clips and all the interviews, and so I just kept out of it. I'm a control freak. In the movies that I made, I wrote, produced, and directed, and edited the films, and so, I did everything. And so anything I get involved in, I try and take over the whole project. So when I heard he was going to do a documentary, I said, well, I'm just going to keep my distance, because if I'm involved, I'll try to take over the whole picture. So go ahead and do what you want to do. So, and I think he did a pretty good job. He left out a lot of stuff, but...
Did he leave out anything in particular that you wish made the cut?
Oh, yeah. That was one of the second show I ever wrote in television when I was 21. was the first performance in television by Peter Falk. And he was in this play with Jack Klugman, and he was only in it for 6 or 7 minutes, but he stole the whole show. And it was a live show, and after it was on the air, the phone was ringing in the control room, and everybody wanted to know who this guy was. And he ended up getting the role in Murder Incorporated off of this show, because the director saw him, and he played the same character, basically, in the same costume, and got an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. So, and then Peter Falk and I had a long relationship over the years, and I ended up writing some Columbos years later. But I thought that would have been nice to be in the documentary, and there was no mention of Peter Falk, and that great scene between Jack Klugman and Peter Falk would have been a wonderful addition to the show. So like I say, you don't run the whole show, and whatever they do, they do.
That's the thing though about your career. You have meddled or been a part of so much, genre-wise, but television, film. You've had such an impact, and I came to your work through the blaxploitation films, and then I learned you were also the guy who did Q The Winged Serpent and the stuff. Yeah. And I realized, looking back from my teen years, back to my childhood, that you made so many films in so many different areas that I truly cherished. So
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. They also left out all my theatrical work, my stage plays, which I did in England. I did a couple of plays, and one was called Motive, with Honor Blackman, who played Pussy Galore in the and James Bond, and it had a wonderful cast. And we did that over in England, and then Carol Baker took over the part and played it. And you remember Carol Baker? She was Baby Doll.
Yeah.
So that was a good play. We did a play in New York called Nature of the Crime with Tony LoBianco. It was very, very good. And another play called Washington Heights. And out here we've done a few plays. And recently we put on a musical here, which the Sherman Brothers wrote some time ago with me, called Levi, and we played that here for a number of weeks. And it was really good, too. It was terrific. We're hoping to get it to Broadway eventually. So that's my chance to write a Broadway musical.
Yeah.
And we did it, and we put it on, and it was a wonderful production. And there's a lot of other things that have been done that never get touched upon, but you can only do so much in a 90-minute movie or 2-hour movie.
Sure. And you can't control what films of yours or what TV shows of yours that you've worked on that really get a stranglehold on pop culture. But in your case, so many of them have.
Well, I hope so. What's nice to me is that I see that I just get a Blu-ray. Somebody says, we're doing a Blu-ray of one of your movies, and the fact that it's 35 years old doesn't seem to matter, and they want me to do a narration on it, and then they put out a beautiful, enhanced copy of the show. It looks just gorgeous. Huh. Never looked as good, and and it's playing again. People are seeing it, and I just came out with Full Moon High, and all 3 episodes of the It's Alive trilogy. Yeah. All of them in Blu-ray. All of them in a package.
We got it.
And then they came out with the Blu-ray of The Ambulance, which I did with James Earl Jones and Eric Roberts. And so all these just came out within the last couple of months. And everything I've done is just about being reproduced on Blu-ray. And a whole new audience is looking forward to seeing it, I hope.
Oh, definitely. I since I've gotten the Stuff Blu-ray and the Ambulance Blu-ray, I've been passing them out to friends because I want, my buddies to see these movies. They are wild films that aren't are just simply not being made today.
Well, today, there are a lot of good movies being made, but
sure.
today the principal movies are the huge special effects motion pictures that I wouldn't want to be involved in, because it's too much of a collaborative effort. It's so much special effects and so much production in terms of set design and construction and all the other stuff that goes into making these blockbusters, that you're part of an army of people that's making the film, and everybody else has got their 2 cents in and making decisions, and you really you lose control because the special effects people end up controlling the film, and all these movies look alike. You go to the theater, you see the trailers come on, and they all look just like the other trailer that just came off. And they're all made by the same special effects houses too. So the mark on the pictures is not the director's work; it's the special effects people.
Well, to your point, you look back at something like Bone. I mean, really, that is, of course, you're collaborating with a crew and your actors, but you're just running, gunning that movie. Like, can you talk a little bit about that transition you made from TV to Bone and how you got that done?
Well, it was an unusual film, and it was about racism in America, and people weren't doing movies about that subject at the time, and they're still not really doing it. I mean, they do safe racial discrimination films, but they don't want to get into dealing with the sexuality of racial discrimination and the fear that white people have of black people, and the power that gives black people over white people. So that's what Bone's all about, and it was made 40-some years ago, and it's probably way ahead of its time today. You don't see pictures like that today. And
Mr. Cohen, I have to ask, when making Bone way back then, as you mentioned, at a time where films like that weren't being made, and even so today, what type of, did you run into any pushback, or was the experience just the same as when you were directing The Ambulance or Q?
No, I didn't have any problems when I was making the picture. There was one black actor in the film, Yaphet Kotto, and he loved the part. He says to this day it's the best part he ever played in his career, and it's probably true. And he was not 100% comfortable since he was the only black person on the set. But and most of the crew were just elderly men who had been big technicians at MGM and had retired. The director of photography was George Folsey, who had done Meet Me in St. Louis and Green Dolphin Street, pictures with Gene Kelly, pictures with Fred Astaire. I mean, this guy had worked with every major star, and the head of the lighting department, Fenton Hamilton, was working on the picture. He'd been lighting people like Greta Garbo and Joan Crawford for years. Here they were working on the Larry Cohen movie, and it was a subject that was a little shocking to them. They were mostly conservative gentlemen in here who are doing this picture about sex between a white housewife and a rapist who breaks into her home, and they fall in love. I mean, this was something they had to get used to.
Right.
So, but there was never any dissension on the set. No comments were ever made. Everybody just came to work every day, and I think the crew people were astonished by the level of the acting and the intensity of the performances. And they appreciated good acting. They'd been around a lot of good acting over the years at MGM, so they enjoyed the experience, I think, in the long run. They just had to get over the initial shock.
Sure. I can imagine. But then, your next two films, Black Caesar and Hell Up in Harlem, I mean, did Bone naturally lead into those getting off of the ground, or I mean, based on the success or what you achieved with that film?
Well, I couldn't say Bone was a success because it wasn't a theatrical success because nobody knew what the hell to do with it.
Right.
They would try. It was a black comedy. They were trying to sell it as a black exploitation action film, and I said that, my God, there's no action in the picture. It's a comedy. And the distributor said, well, am I going to stand in the aisle and tell them not to laugh? And I said, well, that's not a very good argument, because when people come to a theater and expect to see an action movie and they pay to get in and they don't get one, then they're not going to enjoy themselves. If you order a vanilla ice cream and we give you the best chocolate, you're not happy because you didn't order chocolate. You ordered vanilla. So you gotta sell a movie for what it is. You can't misrepresent it. But anyway, it took years for that picture to finally find its home. And now it plays in art houses all the time, and revival houses. And of course, thank God for the wonderful DVD that was put out by Blue Underground.
Yeah. Great tip. So how did then Bone lead into Black Caesar and Hell Up in Harlem?
Well, Mr. Arkoff, who was the head of American International, called me, and he'd seen Bone, and he declined to distribute it, but he appreciated it, and he said he wanted to do some movies like Shaft and Superfly for the black audience, and did I have any ideas? And I just happened to have a treatment in the car called Black Caesar, which I'd been hired to write by Sammy Davis Jr., and he wanted to get away from just being a stooge from Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and to do something on his own. And I thought, being a little guy, he could play something like Little Caesar, like Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney did those gangster parts. So I wrote this for him, and he was supposed to pay me $10,000, but he never came up with the money. And his manager came to me and said, Sammy's in trouble with the Internal Revenue Service. He can't pay you. Please let him out of the agreement. And I said, I'm not going to sue Sammy Davis for $10,000. So I had the treatment. So when Arkoff spoke up, I ran down and got it, and we made the deal the same day, and we were shooting in a couple of weeks.
Oh, man. And, now you're with Fred Williamson, and my favorite moments of King Cohen, or some of my favorite moments of King Cohen, are these dueling stories between you and him about what went down on Black Caesar.
Well, he doesn't want to admit that he made me do the stunts first, but he's lying, of course. And you can see it in the movie. If you look, you see there's a scene where he gets buried in a coal yard by a vehicle, picks him up and buries him in a pile of coal. And then there's a shot later on showing him and me, a photograph standing side by side, and I'm as black as he is because I just came out of the coal. And obviously, I went into the coal before him. There's no reason why I would have gone into the coal after he did it. So I obviously did it first, which verifies my story that I did the stunts before him. So, but he doesn't want to appear reticent or anything. So naturally, he wouldn't admit it. But we're very good friends. We do like each other a lot, and I had some great times with him.
Well, looking back at that, I don't know, can you call blaxploitation a genre? I mean, are you even comfortable with that terminology?
I think every movie's exploitation of some kind. You're trying to get people to pay to come into your theater and see your show, whether it's at the Midway where you're advertising the bearded lady and the world's tallest man and the dog-faced boy. Whatever it is, you're trying to get people to come up and pay their 10 cents and buy a ticket and come in. So, everything's exploitation. That's why we advertise. So there was nothing wrong with giving some black actors a chance to play something other than a butler or a maid. So I was happy to do something that would employ a lot of good black actors and provide entertainment for people, white and black. Everybody came to that movie. And of course, you know how it is. All the kids want to be black now. They all got to wear their hats backwards and sing rap. It's the thing. It's the in thing to be black. So even if you weren't black, you wanted to think black. And so I think that picture was perfect for its time and is ready for a remake.
Yeah. Well, Superfly just had its remake, so why
I heard
not?
it wasn't successful, though. I don't think.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. No, I'd like to see you go back, sort of like what you did with Original Gangsters, and do another crime film.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed doing Original Gangsters because everybody was in it. Pam Grier, Jim Brown, Fred, everybody were in it. Superfly, Shaft, everybody was reunited in that film. And what I didn't like about it was having to shoot in Gary, Indiana, when it was 105 degrees every day.
Yeah, no thanks.
The actors some of them were on oxygen.
Oh my God!
And I was glad nobody died. Or that nobody had to be taken away in an ambulance. But it was very, very, very difficult to shoot because of the weather was punishing.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's fascinating. And, ultimately, when you look back on those two films, that era really was a short window. And that style of alpha male action hero sort of got perverted into what we got with Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Well, what happened was they started putting black actors into the picture with a white star.
Right.
And so there'd be a combination of the white star and the black star, and that was the end of the blaxploitation pictures because they got both audiences. And then a lot of black people became, Jim Brown played in quite a few pictures where he was the only black actor, and he was with Burt Reynolds or Raquel Welch or any number of white stars that he worked with, and the business changed in that direction.
And after Hell Up in Harlem, you make quite a radical change with It's Alive.
Yeah, well, It's Alive was something I wanted to do. It was a horror film, but it also was a psychological drama and had something to say. So I was happy to make that picture. And, of course, it was my biggest hit.
Yeah, well, it's hard to get the baby image out of your brain. That certainly sears the psyche.
That picture was the #1 box office picture in America at the time, and it did very well overseas, too. So it won some awards in France, and it played everywhere. And
Bernard Herrmann does the score for it, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's amazing. Rick Baker gets his start on that film with the It's Alive baby. It's
a lot of great things came out of that picture. Yeah, I remember we got a call from Warner Brothers Foreign Division, and the guy says, "Larry, you won't believe it, but your movie It's Alive is the second highest grossing motion picture in the history of Warner Brothers Studios in Singapore." I said, "Singapore? What is Singapore?" So he says, "Oh, that's a pretty good market, and the only picture that Warner Brothers ever had in Singapore that outgrossed It's Alive was My Fair Lady." I said, "Well, we came in second to My Fair Lady in the history of the whole Warner Brothers Studios." I say, "Well, nowadays, now that the Asian market has become so huge, and China is such a big market, and Korea and all of the Asian countries are now open to American movies, which they weren't back in those days. It's Alive would be a great remake for those marketplaces, because obviously there's something about it that appeals to the Asian audience."
Frankly, I'm surprised it hasn't been remade.
Yeah. Well, you never know.
I've got my fingers crossed on it for sure. So what has motivated you throughout your career to choose your projects? How do you go from, Hell Up in Harlem to It's Alive to God Told Me To?
Well, you don't know all the projects that I came up with that didn't get made.
Right.
Or that didn't get made for many more years. I wrote, some of them I made up much earlier, like Special Effects and Perfect Strangers. These were all scripts that I wrote that didn't get made earlier and then got made 10 years later. So everything seems to get made eventually. And you never know what order it's going to happen in. But God Told Me To was something that was inspired by going to the art museum in London and looking at all the biblical artwork there. You know, there was a whole century or two where all the great paintings were all financed by the church, and the subject of almost all the paintings was scenes from the Bible. And I got to tell you, there's nothing ever been as violent as the depictions from the Bible.
Yep.
When I saw the arrows sticking out of people and the decapitations, the rapes, the violence of biblical stories and biblical depictions of God were so vicious, you'd never seen anything like it. And suddenly it seemed to me that, you know, God could be depicted as a villain. And then I had the idea that, of course, if God came to Earth as an alien, at least he wouldn't be really God, but he would think he was, because of the depictions we have of Jesus and his appearance on Earth. So if an alien ever came here and was born here, for example, he has superpowers, he would think he was God. I mean, if Clark Kent really was born, brought up on Earth, by the time Clark Kent was 15 or 16 years old, I'm sure he would have been convinced he was God.
Yeah.
Forget about putting on a Superman suit. He would have thought he was the next embodiment of Jesus.
Right.
Because he had so much more power than any other human being. So anyway, that was the genesis of what God told me to.
And there's, you know, just in talking about that's another concept that could easily be remade today and reworked for a modern audience.
Yeah, well, people talk about it all the time. People come to me, a lot of foreign directors, and they talk to me about making it, but nothing has come of it yet.
So, looking back on your filmography, you know, we've obviously talked about the films that we're obsessed with. Is there a film of yours that you wish got more love that not enough people like us talk about?
Yeah, there is one, particularly one of my favorites is The Private Files of J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah, Jared and I were just talking about that. We haven't seen it.
It's available on Netflix, but it's not out on Blu-ray yet. And that one had such a wonderful cast of actors. And I enjoyed shooting it down in Washington, D.C. at the real FBI headquarters, and really shooting at J. Edgar Hoover's own house and at Quantico, where the training academy is for the FBI, and really getting into the true story of the Bureau. And, you know, I was very happy with that film, and with a wonderful cast of Academy Award-winning actors, and it was just such a great trip to film there at the FBI and all around, because it was the first film ever made about the FBI that didn't have FBI approval and supervision. Up until that time, every picture about the FBI had to be controlled by the Bureau, and an agent had to be present every day on the set. And we got away with not doing any of that, and doing a real tough expose-type movie about the Bureau. So, you know, it went over very well in England. It was a huge hit in England, and the number one picture at the London Film Festival, and played, you know, for 8 or 10 weeks first run, did a couple of runs on the BBC. It was much more accepted in Europe, because in America, the film did not glorify the Democrats or the Republicans. Everybody came off as bad. And in this country, you have to take one political side or another. You can't bash them both, and get away with it, because both sides are going to come after you. So when we premiered this picture at the Kennedy Center in Washington, people came out with their mouths hanging open. They couldn't believe it. I mean, here we were attacking President Nixon and President Roosevelt and President Johnson, and everybody was getting it. And it was all true, but they didn't like to hear it. That was the basic problem. So nobody was on our side.
Well, you've guaranteed that I'll be watching that soon, because that's one of the films of yours I have not yet seen.
I think you can order it on Netflix automatically, and it'll come right on for a couple of bucks.
I'm going to do it. We're going to let you go here in a second, but before we do, Darren, did you want to say anything before we go?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, firstly, thank you for all the wonderful cinema that you've given us. And a lot of your films are more than just exploitation or genre. Like you mentioned earlier, they do have something to say. And so I was wondering, with the state of our society today, political affairs and things like that, what does a Larry Cohen movie in 2018 look or feel like?
Well, I'm trying to do a series now for Netflix or Amazon of 10 one-hour thrillers, and I've written all the 10 scripts already. They're all completely finished, and they're all terrific, and some of the best writings, some of the best material I've ever done. And I'm calling it Larry Cohen's High Concept. And every one of the shows has got a terrific gimmick, a terrific hook, and we're trying to put it together now and sell it to the cable stations. And I've been waiting for the documentary to come out, so to give me a little more visibility and be helpful, perhaps, in selling the High Concept series to cable. It's a really great show, and I think it'll knock you out.
That's exciting.
Well, King Cohen, we saw it at Fantastic Fest last year. Yeah, I know you were there with Steve Mitchell, and it certainly played well with that crowd. And I'm really excited for my friends to see it. So
we've never had a bad showing of it.
Yeah,
and no matter what country it's played in, and it's been playing all over the world, every reaction has been very, very favorable.
Well, we're part of a film club out here in Alamo, Ashburn, and they're showing King Cohen and Q The Winged Serpent back to back.
Yeah, that's a good double feature.
That's an awesome double feature. We're really excited for that.
Well, that's great. Thanks for the call, and I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. See, how cool was that?
Oh, my God.
That really happened. That just happened.
Dude!
Like, that just happened. Yeah, I still can't believe that just happened. Like I said, such a really cool guy, has the most interesting and fun stories. I mean, you got to think, like, you look up on his career on IMDb, all of the stuff that I mentioned about the TV, the theater, and then the films. I mean, with that type of history in Hollywood, working with the people that he's worked with,
everybody,
and that says something. That has to speak to him as a director, that he gets all of these different people who gravitate towards him and want to work on his projects. These indie guerrilla style run and gun, low to no budget movies that the people show up, and they show up because Larry Cohen shows up. He's not just making schlock. Like, he really believes in the films and the stories that he's writing. Speak to him and speak about him and speak to who he is and what he sees in the world and the issues that he touches upon in his films. And I think that, I don't know, that's rare to have a director as prolific as him to still be doing what he's doing.
Well, you were talking a bit about it with him a little bit towards the end of the conversation, but 2018, just the world needs help, and fiction can offer help, or at least solstice. And we're experiencing, through movies like Get Out, and The Witch, and Hereditary, these horror films that are speaking to the times. Larry Cohen, in the stuff, has stuff to say, pun intended. I mean, that's not just about killer ice cream. That movie has serious social commentary
about consumerism,
and his most of his films do, like you're saying. Before we go, Darren, if you were going to point our listeners to a movie, they've just watched King Cohen or they're about to watch King Cohen, like, what is the Larry Cohen film for you? What do you want them to see?
That's such a hard... either Q or The Stuff, like, because those are my two favorites. Q The Winged Serpent, because it has a friggin' flying winged serpent in it, stop motion classic,
and David Carradine, Richard Roundtree, Michael Moriarty.
The cast in that is just like all his films. The cast in it is fucking phenomenal. It's nuts. But then, like, just my love of Harryhausen and stuff like that, I point to that one. But also the stuff, like, because of, that was one of the ones that I caught as a kid that I would watch ad nauseum. Like, I loved that movie. I love the concept behind it. Like, this white, seemingly, it looks good. It looks like it tastes good, but it could kill you. Which, again, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, that directly speaks to a lot of the stuff that we consume. It looks good, but it can kill you. And that's what the stuff is. It talks about, like, our consumerism and stuff like that. But you got Garrett Morris in there. And
oh, man.
It's, I don't know, practical effects. Yeah. That's the thing with Larry Cohen, like, smaller budgets, but with a can-do guerrilla attitude and making the most of that budget with the practical effects and having an affinity for it and a respect for it in a way that it doesn't feel like, again, like he's trying to make schlock. I mean, it really feels like, this is what we have and we're going to make the best with it. And it shines through. So I will point them to the stuff because I feel like it has a lot of it speaks to a lot of who Larry Cohen is. You have a diverse cast. You have social commentary. You have your genre elements in it. You have your gore and your special effects, and it's done in earnest. And so,
I think you hit the nail on the head. The Stuff would be my number one Larry Cohen movie.
Yeah,
because it covers all the bases you just said.
Yeah.
The poster I have in the Dork Cave that is my favorite Larry Cohen movie is Hell Up in Harlem. There is still some social commentary in it, even less than Black Caesar probably, as being a sequel. But that Fred Williamson performance is just top notch.
Yeah.
And like we said in our conversation with Larry, its reputation for those two guys, for Williamson and Larry Cohen. I mean, it's a necessary watch.
Yeah.
I would also point you to The Ambulance. It's a nuts movie. As Larry said, James Earl Jones is in it. It's one of the craziest James Earl Jones performances.
Yeah.
Eric Roberts is nuts
Crazy,
in that movie. Nuts. That's what I think about when I think about The Ambulance. This movie is nuts, to steal a disco phrase.
Yeah.
And, the world loves Marvel movies right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to see a secret MCU movie, you need to watch The Ambulance. And I'm not going to tell you why, but it is within continuity of the MCU, damn it. Or at least it's a meta MCU movie. Seek out the stuff. Seek out The Ambulance. Both have really nice Blu-rays right now.
But that's the fun thing about Larry Cohen. Like, once you break the seal with the stuff, you have a journey ahead of you.
Yeah.
You have some nice, fun surprises.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just go through his filmography, and you may like some more than others, but I guarantee you, as taken as a whole, he has one of the most eclectic and interesting filmographies out there.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I'm going to hunt down The Private Files of J. Edgar Hoover, because I have not seen that movie, and I need to fill that gap.
I'm going to check it out. So you can follow us at ITMODcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can follow Mouth Dork at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untappd. You can follow The Turtle Dork at The Turtle Dork on Twitter, at The Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, and at Brian William Young on Facebook. Wife Dork is at Sidewalk Siren and Bake Dork on Twitter and Instagram, and she is at Sidewalk Siren on Letterboxd. And I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias. That's going to do it for us.
Oh, my God. Brian needs to watch some Larry Cohen movies.
He does.
So does Lisa. Lisa's seen King Cohen and really liked it.
Yeah.
And it's the seal has been broken. It's time for her to check out some films.
Yeah.
But on our last Fistful episode, Brian was talking about Phone Booth, and then I was talking about Cellular.
Yeah.
Right? And shit, that's what I really wanted to talk to Larry about. He needs to close out that trilogy. Oh yeah, the phone trilogy. Oh, he needs his iPhone 10.
Oh my gosh!
Movie.
Yes, I want it.
He shoots it with an iPhone 10 like Tangerine.
Get it back on the phone.
Yeah. I have his phone number now.
Yes, dude, you have Larry Cohen's phone number in your phone.
I'm going to text him.
Like that. That's
so many
that's the
things.
thing. Like that's it. So like a year from now, you can scrolling through your contacts.
Yeah.
You're gonna see Larry Cohen's number in your phone. How fucking dope is that?
That's crazy.
Do you have Larry Cohen's phone number in your phone though?
Today was just Amazing.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Thank you for sharing it with me, Darren.
Thank you for sharing it with me, Brian. And thank you,
I'm
Larry
Brad.
Cohen. I'm sorry, Brad. I miss Brian. You should be here, Brian. The coolest shit. I love the podcast.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I love you, ITMOD.
I love you, ITMOD. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I love you.
I love you, too.
I love the listeners.
I love you all, listeners.
Tweet us. Let us know what you thought about this episode.
Mm-hmm. We are going to try to get some more cool content and interviews up here for you. So, yeah, let us know how we're doing. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week. And until next time.